Welcome back to Watchbox Studios. This is Watches Tonight. I am Tim Mosso. We've got Sean on the switcher. Welcome to one and all. I appreciate you making this show live, especially if you've got to get up early or stay up late. We've got Edward Ledden in the box, Matt Foster, Som R, CLF, Mark S representing Brooklyn, Eddie Landsberg, Miroslav, Enrique Castellano, Mateo C, Sean H, and Joe Tyson from Apex, North Carolina. We've got Butik One, greetings from Lithuania. That's a first on the show, as well as Jay Parmesan, Rick, and Keystar G60. Welcome to all of you guys. Richard Combs, our old friend from South Florida. So, if you enjoy this program, we're going to look forward tonight. We're going to get a little bit speculative. We look forward to Rolex in 2024, as well as what's left of this model year. Chat live, and I share your wrist shots right here tonight on Watches Tonight. Remember, all the coolest watches we have go up on my Instagram, but not all the coolest watches we have go up on our website. So if you want to follow the latest in my life, as well as the comings and goings of our coolest pieces, like that Patek Philippe Marine chronometer, check out Tim_Mosso. And by the way, do my friend Chris Lee a favor, check out our collector conversation. He likes cars, watches, video games, and music. There's something there for everyone. All right. Guys, viewer wrist shots number one, I asked, you answered. We're starting with Marcio M of Richmond, a loyal follower of the show. You can see he's watching Chris Lee's collector conversation right there with his recently factory serviced Patek Philippe 3919G. And yeah, with Watchbox Studios, that is a power tandem. We got Michael K of South Florida hitting the road with his Patek Philippe 5930G World Time chronograph. We have Marceau R and Carmen the dog admiring the Ulysse Nardin Freak X. I don't know that Carmen's into it. I'm not reading it, but I'm very much into it. We have James L of Toronto who stuns with this Salmon Dial Chapek Antarctique Passage de Drake salmon, looking good. Excellent taste, by the way. That's a tasty caffeinated brew. And Sarab P and his Mint Dial Rolex take a tour of Vermont to watch the leaves turn and fall. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your watch on this box. We have KTKC said he was pleasantly surprised to see Chris Lee on that video for sure. Chris is a good guy. You definitely want to check that out. We got Tom joining in from Liverpool in the UK. We have Patel Philippe saying very nice Patek wrist shots. Junior Johnson, Keselovitz, we've got him saying it's Patek, not Patek. Okay. We have Dr. Stu in the house from King of Prussia. That's a local boy. Got to appreciate that. We got Jim Millett, who always sends up the bat signal on my Facebook live streams. We have a Facebook page, Talking Time with Tim Mosso, and for some reason the alert doesn't work. So Jim will find me when I'm live and tell everyone else. We have Kasim joining in from Dubai, staying up super late, and we've got Gel Mibson, who is a longtime online friend. All right. Rolex in 2024, predictions and possibilities. It struck me that this is the time. First, because we know that 2023 is not over, and if you remember last year in the fall, Rolex dropped that Gonzo 50mm titanium deep sea challenge dive watch. At the same time, in the post-Basel World era, new watches can come at any time, and this being the 70th anniversary of the Rolex Submariner, a core watch for a core brand, we haven't really seen anything from the Sub this year, which leads me to believe that sometime around Halloween or between Halloween and Thanksgiving here in the US, we're going to see some serious hardware from the Submariner line. We're going to see something worthy of being called the 70th anniversary Sub. And I just think these out-of-sequence launches by Rolex are beginning to define a sequence of their own. So we're going to take a look at what we got this year so far, or at least what we got this model year, and then make some predictions for the rest of 23 and then 24 to come. So this was an unprecedented year, and it really started almost this time last year with the launch of the Rolex Deep Sea Challenge. Now, in 2012, James Cameron took a prototype of this down to the bottom of the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the ocean. And I think after 2 or 3 years, we all kind of assumed that nothing was going to come of this. The Deep Sea D-Blue, the James Cameron Sea Dweller, came out, and it would have been fair to conclude that that was going to be the extent of the promotion of the Rolex involvement with that dive. But you'd be wrong, because 10 long years later, Rolex launched the production version of a watch that originally existed only in 5 prototype pieces. So this thing can do it all. 11,000 meters, 50 millimeters in diameter. It is unprecedented in its full titanium construction, a first ever for Rolex, and frankly, I can't imagine how anyone would have worn it had it been made out of steel. This is an awesome machine, right down to the evocative vintage-inspired bevels on the lugs. This is the true successor to the 1950s and 1960s Deep Sea Special that on the Bathyscaphe Trieste also bottomed out in the Challenger Deep. So $25,950 and tested to 125% of its rated depth. That was a hell of a launch. Now, while it was 2022, it was for this model year, so I'm including it. The biggest surprise of this model year, for the 60th anniversary of the Daytona and the 100th anniversary of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, we got, well, lots of new Daytonas, but specifically the Paul Newman revival. This actually came out a little bit after we saw the 60th anniversary Daytona collection, which was the full redesign of the Daytona we've been waiting for since the year 2000. But this watch is different. First, because it makes the Paul Newman look current in the catalog. You can see those exotic Singer dial lollipop style indices on the sub-registers. You could see on the bezel the red 100 signifying the 100th anniversary of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Not the 100th running, but the 100th anniversary. And my God, were they psychic? This year, Ferrari, in its first Le Mans start in 50 years in the Premier class, won the 24 with the 499p. I get chills just looking at that red 100 on the bezel. What did Rolex know that no one else did? A very cool watch. It's also the first Daytona that includes a 24-hour sub-register rather than a conventional 12-hour chronograph sub-register. So a really, really neat watch, but monstrously expensive at $51,400 in white gold. At the very least, you get something special that's likely to be a short production run, and along with the Platinum model, co-equally the first Daytona with a display caseback. The display casebacks, white gold and platinum, interesting, worthwhile, not artisanal, but Rolex did things to the 4131 and 4132 to make the older 4130 movement more comely to the eye. So, worthwhile. One odd note, I haven't seen any 2023 Daytonas, new or used. I'm not sure if these are just slow to market or if the production ramp has been stymied by assembly line problems, but I have not seen one example here at Watchbox or in the wild. So, what else happened this year? Well, a full titanium Rolex Yachtmaster. We knew that sailor Ben Ainslie had been testing a prototype of this, but as with the Deep Sea James Cameron prototype, it wasn't a given that such a thing would make it to market, and I think his was even on an Oyster Flex. So here we get a version of the 42mm Yachtmaster, now all in titanium, and the price is even pretty reasonable, $14,050. And again, unprecedented for us to get a full-tie Rolex, along with the Deep Sea Challenge. This is new ground for the brand. I would also say it confirms that the Yachtmaster is Rolex's most experimental line. Like Oldsmobile at General Motors, where Oldsmobile first got the automatic transmission, turbocharging, front-wheel drive, the full aerodynamic car treatment. These are all technologies that debuted on the Oldsmobiles first because they had a high enough price point to support new technology, but they didn't want to risk Cadillac by testing untried technologies if they might fail technically or in the marketplace. And the way General Motors uses Oldsmobile, or used Oldsmobile, is the way Rolex uses the Yachtmaster. In the early 90s, they wanted to see how a posh Submariner design would do on the market, so they created the original Yachtmaster. Later on, it became a launch platform for full platinum dials on Rolex watches. We got the massive programmable retrograding and flyback Yachtmaster 2 Regatta timer. We got the first Oyster Flex strap bracelets on the Yachtmaster, and now we get titanium. This has always been to Rolex what the DeVille line is to Omega. It's where it tests out all of its new ideas first before committing them to more mainstream models. And I do think $14,050 is quite reasonable for what you're getting here. Now, another Rolex tilt at the dress watch genre, and I think the jury's kind of out on this one. It doesn't feel different enough from the Cellinis, which had already more or less failed at doing what Rolex wanted them to do. Not a bad design, combining an Oyster Perpetual and an Explorer dial in a dress watch case, but I'm not sure it's the scintillating hit that Rolex needs. And I do believe there's a way Rolex can really hit it off in the dress watch segment and have a hit on its hands, but it's not going to be this. So we get an Explorer dial in a Cellini style case, now with display casebacks. Okay, that's nice. Silicone hairspring, okay, that's nice, but you can't wear it upside down. The muted response from collectors seems to have said it all. Rolex appears to continue to struggle with the dress watch segment. Product quality always is excellent, but generating sustained excitement around the models is always a challenge. Now, at $22,000 to $23,300, these are not cheap, and I do wonder what would happen if Rolex decided to just launch a titanium, tantalum, or steel dress watch, if maybe that's the key to cracking the code. I don't know, but it would be worth trying at this point. We also saw a death in the family. Well, being a little bit melodramatic there, but I loved the old Milgauss Z Blue. It came out in 2014, succeeding the older white dial, and it was frankly an undersubscribed and rarely ordered piece while it was in production. Now that it's gone, there's a markup on the aftermarket. So be it. That's the story of Rolex. There's also the closely related Rolex Explorer 40. So we replaced the 39mm version after 13 years. You can still get the old 36. At $7,700, this remains one of the most excessively priced points of entry into the world of Rolex ownership, and because I know someone's going to keep score and remind us this is not the cheapest, yes, a 36mm Oyster Perpetual is $6,100, and a 41mm Oyster Perpetual, again in steel, is going to be $6,300. So that's still the cheapest way to get into a men's Rolex watch today. We got a two-tone and a full gold GMT Master. So we got the two-tone in steel and yellow gold. Previously, you only had your choice of steel and Everrose. And then we got a full gold GMT Master, this time in yellow. Previously, again, it was only full red gold. Also important, these two models launch only with the Jubilee bracelet, so it's going for a more upscale and dress-oriented, slightly more formal take on the long-running GMT look. Sky Dwellers. I'm not going to say all is new, but quite a bit is. The Sky Dweller received that lovely blue-green dial, a new mint dial, which is really cool. I happen to like that look the best. And the different appearance options give you a couple of little details that I love, such as the fact that Rolex has split the crown down at 6 o'clock to either side of the June aperture on the annual calendar scale. So that's pretty neat. The white gold Sky Dweller returns to the collection after hiatus, and in this case it returns with a Oyster Flex strap, which is a great and versatile way to wear it, and it does mitigate the cost of owning a white gold Sky Dweller. So now you can own it on the Oyster Flex without having to buy the full bracelet. A cool piece, got an upgraded caliber 9002, which takes some of the current Rolex standards like the current rotor, the current Chronergy escapement, and the current Paraflex shock protection, and brings it over to the old 9001 GMT annual calendar movement in the Sky Dweller. I really like all of that. I do love that blue-green dial. I wish you could get that on some sort of white gold or steel watch, but there has to be some selling point for the huge price premium you pay to get a full rose gold, full bracelet Sky Dweller, so I don't blame them for not giving it to us in steel. And what were undoubtedly the most controversial new moves in the Rolex catalog this year, the Celebration dial, which I was not the only one to compare to the Dippin' Dots ice cream. Now, I like the Celebration dial, just like I like Dippin' Dots. Back on the high school AP Physics trip to Six Flags, I probably ate 3 full-size cups of Dippin' Dots and lightened my wallet by $30 in cash at Six Flags in New Jersey. So I have fond memories. But at the same time, that was the undercard to the emoji dial, which was probably the most controversial thing Rolex has done in decades. I can't think of anything else that was more contentious than this. You either get it or you don't. You either think it's fun because luxury watches are fun and silliness is expected. No one needs these things after all. Or you are mortally offended and you will never reconcile yourself and you're no longer on Christmas card terms with Rolex. That's okay. They weren't sending one to you. They won't miss yours. I thought this was great. All right, let's jump into the box. We got Chaz from the Berg. Greg, welcome. William Rizzo. We got Hester P. What is the single best Rolex model experts? Obviously, the Milgauss Z Blue. No. I think that the ultimate for me would be some sort of oyster quartz in white gold with a lapis dial. Oyster Quartz Date 8 white gold lapis dial. James Carrion, who is a YouTuber himself, I believe, saying Sky Dweller just offers so much. Love the updates to that watch, and I'm with you, James. We have Thomas Burnett saying the 1908 needs a moon phase to soup it up. I agree. Anodyne is the word. A Mick in Florida saying 1908 tantalum triple calendar moon phase. I would buy it. You and me both. I think an enamel dial would look really good on one of those. The return of the Rolex enamel dial after 70 years would be welcomed. And given that it's already a premium price and Rolex likes to do stuff in-house, I think they'd find a way to price it reasonably. Jim Millett, love the titanium Yachtmaster, but no chance of getting one. I've given up on Rolex, but seen the light and got a bathyscaphe instead. I think you did right, getting the bathyscaphe instead. Tim, do you think Rolex will ever offer an Explorer 2 with an Oyster Flex strap? Yes, but would you be willing to buy a white gold Explorer 2 to get it? That's something we haven't seen in the past. It seems like Rolex has gotten an aversion to offering Oyster Flex on a base metal watch. Now, I have some thoughts about how that might change, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. Dr. Stu saying, guessing if the LeMans Daytona ever makes it into meaningful production, they will remove the red 100 from the dial. You think that, but then they kept the Kermit in production for years after the 50th anniversary. The Platona is still around years after the 50th anniversary of that model, and the GMT 2005 anniversary dial in green was around for years after it was no longer the 100th anniversary of Rolex. But I do hope they make that a one-year watch. I think you should protect the guy who pays his 51 grand to buy that very special timepiece. Mr. Zoso saying a steel version of the LeMans Daytona will make everything before it meaningless, which is why I hope they don't do it. And Kasim saying, I'm going to be getting the LeMans. Send me that wrist shot, please. Get a car in the frame for good measure. All right, jumping back to our regularly scheduled program, viewer wrist shots number 2. Adam of Candlewood Lake, Connecticut, hit the lake one last time in his 2023 Summertime Guys with the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. One last shot of the sun. Dave T. from Canada goes exploring with his Rolex Explorer and what looks like his Toyota 4Runner back in the background there. I think that's a 4Runner. By the way, he waited at his dealer 13 months to get that watch. He's psyched and he says it was worth the wait. Jerry C. of Germany handles garden work with his Zinn 105 Date 8. You see, that is what I call a sports watch and a tool watch, just usually not that kind of tool. David A. and his family go apple picking in New England with the Rolex Sea Dweller TT, that is for two-tone. And Xavier L. and his Ford Mustang enjoy the open road with Seiko SPB 385, and that is a limited edition GMT with one of the best Seiko dials I have ever seen. 110th anniversary piece, I believe. Okay, send your shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. We got Time Hill, Jamie Opulence. We have Steve asking, is there a watch box in the UK? Not yet, but hold that thought. And it's definitely a place we'd like to be. We've had a lot of talks about it. We were very close in the past. I predict this will happen. What else is going on? Original OC and Detroit Spartan joining in. Okay, Mark S. Tim, will you confirm the highly anticipated Halloween episode later this month? Yes, I put it on my calendar. I know I'm supposed to do it. Mark, you've been waiting years for this. I plan to deliver. No one but you will watch it, but again, I keep the faith with my longtime supporters. Okay, 2024, Rolex predictions and possibilities. Let's talk about what's coming. So here's the thing, open question. Have we seen the end of the 70th anniversary Submariner model year? Because so far, I don't feel like we've seen the beginning. What's really changed in the Submariner collection? And let's remember that although the GMT and the Daytona are hot lately, the Sub is and has always been the face of Rolex. If Rolex is the best known watch brand in the world, the Submariner is the best known and certainly the most copied watch. All of which means in its 70th year, we need something more than a price adjustment, because these things always get more expensive, but do they get different qualitatively? Here's what I think. Rolex is going to launch the 70th anniversary Submariner before the end of this year. They're going to make sure they don't carry this over to 2024, because that will be the year for the GMT. I think either this month or next, you're going to see whatever Rolex thinks the 70th anniversary Submariner should be. In the post-Baselworld era, and given their recent track record, it's both anticipated and predicted that this will happen. We got the Deep Sea Challenge last fall, so this could definitely occur out of sequence. Will the watch be platinum? Will it be titanium? Will we get the Oyster Flex strap bracelet? Perhaps bracelets or straps. What we haven't seen yet from Rolex is a watch that comes with an alternate strap. Could you imagine getting the Sub with a strap or bracelet that includes the quick release in the bracelet itself? So, for example, like some recent IWCs we've seen, or the pull tab spring bars on a Patek Philippe, if you put the quick release system in the strap or the bracelet, you don't have to change the case, which makes sense because the Sub was just redesigned in 2020. I can't see them redesigning it to include a quick release system just 3 years later. I would also say this, I can't imagine Rolex lowering the price point of the Sub to offer a steel version of it with an Oyster Flex. But what I could imagine is a situation where you buy it on the bracelet And this 70th anniversary watch comes with a quick release built into the bracelet and an accessory Oyster Flex that also has a quick release built in. So perhaps a situation where you can swap them yourself and you pay up front for the bracelet, but some sort of consideration, a small change to the band, makes it possible to swap back and forth. I think that would be really neat, and it would be something Rolex could expand to its other model lines after this year. And honestly, there's a whole lot of potential for this to be one of the most memorable Submariners in years. So what are we going to get? Well, we could get something like a vintage tribute, maybe a 1970s Comex tribute, where we get a special dial and a helium escape valve on a Submariner, not a Sea Dweller. That would be really neat. I would be all in favor of that. And frankly, I would be disappointed if the 70th anniversary sub is not a no date. Remember, there are Submariners and Submariner dates. No date is a term we use in the community. It is not something Rolex endorses. Subs don't have dates, and that's just the way it is. I would also say this, in a world where the Paul Newman has come back as an official Rolex offering, and the company clearly has become more comfortable with retro design, why not go all out with the 70th anniversary Submariner? Base it on one of the rarest subs of all time, a 5510 Explorer dial, big crown, chapter ring, Explorer dial. I could like where that's going. Red triangle, here's what you need to do. So, 5510 Explorer dial, chapter ring, big crown, tri-Arabic numerals, no date, no crown guards. Do it with an aluminum red triangle bezel insert, a plexiglass crystal, or a sapphire that looks just like one, and hand-finished lug bevels. Even if this means the watch needs to be handmade in small batches, it would be truly special. And remember, Rolex has shown some willingness to bring back the bevels as well as vintage designs on recent watches. This is not impossible, as about, I want to say, maybe 1,000 of these were originally made, far fewer survive. It's very possible that we could see a rare limited edition from Rolex. They have done this in the past, but there's only 3 or 4 truly limited editions as opposed to limited production. There are only a few limited numbered production Rolex watches ever. I believe it was like the first 100 Datejusts in 1945, the 5100 Texan, I think the King Midas originally, the 9630 was 1,000 pieces, and there were a couple of limited editions for potentates in the Middle East. But this would be a great example of using a limited edition the right way in modern Rolex. I would also say this is the sub after all, and Rolex is the Submariner. Any additional production steps or slow walked process would be worth the time and energy invested. I also think there might be a super niche, like high-end 70th anniversary sub, and then something that's a broader production that'll be more accessible. You could get both at the same time. Okay, so that's the rest of 2023. Now, what do I think is coming for next year? Well, the history of the Rolex GMT Master. It launched in 1954, originally created for Pan Am pilots. It was a joint effort between Rolex and Pan Am. Initially, the 6542 was a single time zone watch that had a 12-hour hand and a 24-hour hand, and they were mechanically geared together so you couldn't set them separately. It was the Pepsi blue and red bidirectional timing bezel that would allow you to apply a GMT offset and get the destination airport time. So that's how that worked. That was 1954. In 1959, we got the longest running of the GMT Masters, which was the 1675, and that ran from 59 to the early 1980s. In 83, we got the first GMT Master 2, which was the first true dual time that could be used to calculate a third time zone, and that also was the advent of the so-called black and red Coke bezel. 2005, we got the first Supercase GMT, as well as the anniversary dial in bright green. And then in 2018, we got the current generation of the watch, which has included everything from the return of the Jubilee bracelet to the availability of a steel Pepsi to a new lefty crown GMT, which is the first we have ever seen of its sort. So what is 2024 going to bring? Well, could it be full platinum? It was for the Daytona back in 2013, but then again, that might be too obvious. I don't believe we've ever had a regular production full platinum GMT, which makes that a very appealing idea for the anniversary, but Rolex would be cribbing itself and copying its own precedent. So maybe it does something new. That is how Rolex celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Daytona, but we might see the return of the GMT Master, which officially was retired in 1999 with the lapse of the 16700 reference. That was, for a long time, an undercard offering below the GMT Master 2 that you could obtain for the same look but for less money. Maybe Rolex brings it back but keeps it very exclusive so it doesn't seem like a junior GMT so much as a special GMT. There's also the potential return of the Coke bezel. I think we expected to see it by now, but because this generation came out in 2018 and Rolex has waited this long, I think if we're going to see a new Coke bezel, we're going to see it next year. So that's where I think the GMT is going. I think we'll see a special medal. I think we'll see a special dial. I think we will see the return of the Coke bezel, and 50/50 will get a new GMT Master to exist alongside the GMT Master 2, which would allow Rolex to expand the model line, increase production, not dilute the GMT Master 2 because they wouldn't make any more of those, but there would be more GMTs to go around and hopefully reduce waiting lists. So I also think a King Midas revival is coming. This is what I think Rolex needs to do to zing in the dress watch market. I realize they're committed to the perpetual 1908. Okay, keep chipping away at that tantalum case, lapis dial. There are all sorts of things you can do on the 1908 to make that exciting and better than it came out initially. Remember, Rolex just launched a green aventurine dial on the date. There are lots of things they can do with the 1908, but if you want something in the dress watch column that's as hot as a sub, a Daytona 100, or a GMT Lefty, you need to bring back the King Midas. The original King Midas, which was the 9630 reference, came out in 1964. It was said to be a limited edition of 1,000 pieces in both yellow and white gold. It was also a watch that was shockingly heavy and expensive for its time. It marked the beginning of Rolex's internal understanding that a person could own more than one Rolex watch. Previously, the thought was if you're a pilot, you buy the pilot's watch. If you're a traveler, you buy the chronograph. If you're a diver, you buy a Submariner. It's a watch for the purpose. Who needs more than one focused, purposeful watch? Well, as it turned out, a lot of people. And as it became apparent that Rolex had a premium brand that could be expanded, a person could own several Rolex watches for different occasions. Flying, hiking, diving, driving a car, the opera. And this is your opera watch right here. It was the beginning of full integrated bracelet design at Rolex, long before the 5100 Texan and the arrival of Gerald Genta design in the 70s. This really showed the way. And the watch included the first fully themed box and accessory set of which I'm aware, as it came with this wonderful Hellenic themed box, including an urn, special paperwork and documentation. This was a watch whose boxed set was obviously collectible, even in the 60s when no one kept that kind of stuff. So I think this could help turn around the reputation of Rolex dress watches. You can do it in platinum, you can do it in rose gold, you can do things that weren't done in the past. It doesn't have to be a complete reissue, but that would definitely help. Okay. Unlike the Submariner and other 50s and 60s Rolex models, the Midas was undeniably a luxury watch right at the very beginning. And although it did not point the way forward for Rolex dress watches, the King Midas did anticipate Rolex's eventual 80s and 90s move into the upper end of the luxury market, even at a time when most of Rolex's business was still the sports watch. So I think the time is perfect for a comeback. This is a watch that embodies what Rolex is today, while also keeping the faith with its past. Wrist shots number 3, Sam N and his Panerai Luminor submersible, the rare palm tree dial, I take it, relaxed beneath the palm tree with the Watchbox app. Thank you for shouting out the Watchbox app. Guys, get the Watchbox app. If you miss Watchville and you want something that aggregates your favorite blogs and journals, get the Watchbox app. If you want to see my newest videos as they come out, get the Watchbox app. And if you want to track the market value of watches, get the Watchbox app. Justin F. showcases his spectacular white gold Cartier Tank Américain. I am dying over that dial. Allie N. of Denver, Colorado sits down for a bit at Sunday Vinyl with her moon swatch. That's where my sister lives, Denver, Colorado. Joel B. and Flint the Cat mutually appreciate his Grand Seiko SPGA 469. I like that. Watches and whiskers. We're fans. By the way, Kate, my sister, if you're watching this, happy anniversary today. Neil S. of Boca Raton shoots a his and hers shot of Rolex Datejust and Cartier Tank. Well done. Ma'am and my man. Okay, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your wrist on my list. What's going on in the box right here? We have Max from Vancouver, British Columbia joining in. We have Frosito P saying first time live. Thank you for joining us. We have Faisal saying that looks like something Trump would wear. Which one? The Midas? I'm not aware of Trump being a watch guy. As far as I know, he once bid on a Ronald Reagan watch at auction, but I don't think he's a watch guy. I'm not aware of that. I don't think he's a car guy. I don't think he's a watch guy. I do think he's a golf guy. What else is going on here? Steve 1010. Greetings, Tim. Great show on Rolex. I'm a fan. Thank you, Steve. Peter K. Unless there's going to be an XL model on that Midas remake, it will always look like a girl's watch to me. Elvis had one. I don't know. I thought he was a ladies' man. What else is going on here? Time Hill, loving that Cartier. And Abdul joining from Germany, one of our most reliable and loyal supporters. Steve saying Trump has a Patek. If I can verify that, I will include an update in our next show. Watches of Presidents. I've been wanting to do it for a while, but either our next show or the one after that is probably going to be the Halloween episode. So Trump better own an orange and black watch. What else is going on? Rolex predictions and possibilities. What won't we see in 2024? Okay, here's what we're not going to see. A new Milgauss is possible, but I suspect that Rolex will wait until the true 70th anniversary of the Milgauss and the date in 2026 to do dramatically different things with those model lines. We've actually gotten a new date fairly recently. Both the date 40 and the date 36 are still pretty fresh. I think we'll see anniversary models, not a full model line redesign, whereas I do think in 2026 we will see a full model line redesign of the Milgauss, possibly to include things like the original honeycomb dial and a rotating bezel, which some versions of the original did have. So I don't think we're going to see anything in the date or in the Milgauss collection really change for next year, with the possible exception of some new dials, as Rolex does move around the dial arrangements and options on the date on a regular basis. I also think 2025 will mark 120 years of Rolex, which is why I think we will see a colossal number of special editions, dials, configurations, and even one-year variants. So don't expect any of that next year in 2024. Rolex has a habit of keeping anniversary models in the collection long term. Kermit, Platona, GMT anniversary dials, but 2025 might mark a departure from this practice. You don't get to celebrate 120 years all that often. So I do think we will see either limited editions that are truly numbered or expressly identified one-year production variants that will only come out that year and maybe be available for 15 to 18 months at the most. So what will we see in 2024? Well, I think a new Yachtmaster 2 is definitely due. Remember, we haven't seen a new Yachtmaster 2 since the first Yachtmaster 2. The watch is still in its first generation. There have been some upgrades, there have been some dial changes, a few new variants in terms of case metals, but it will be 17 years next year since we first saw the most complicated ever Rolex watch. So still in its first generation and hulking at 44 millimeters, this is a watch that feels like a relic from the 2000s, which was the era of truly huge watches, when bigger was better and biggest was best. We got the 44 millimeter Deep Sea, we got the 44 millimeter Yachtmaster 2 towards the tail end of that decade. In 2011, we got a 42 millimeter Explorer 2, which was developed during the 2000s. So I do think that a second generation of this watch, they'd be well advised to go down to 42 millimeters. There's already a 42 millimeter in the Yachtmaster collection. I don't think that would compromise the legibility of the countdown complication on the Yachtmaster 2. I think it would make the watch more popular. I think it would make the watch more wearable. And I also think this is a great candidate for adoption of a Oyster Flex strap bracelet. So I can see a lot of changes happening here if Rolex is going to do a second generation of this watch, which is not a given. Okay, all new model lines. Rolex has been more open to creating entirely new model lines in recent decades. We got the Yachtmaster 2. We got the Sky Dweller. No one saw either of those watches coming, and they're really not a continuation of any previous model line. The Yachtmaster 2 is nothing like the Yachtmaster, and nobody saw a GMT annual calendar coming out in 2012. The Deep Sea at Rolex is now its own model line, including the Deep Sea and the Deep Sea Challenge. And of course, the Perpetual 1908 does away with the old Cellinis to create an all-new dress watch model line. Rolex hopes to cut the cord and launch without any of the baggage of its past false starts. So I do think Rolex might launch all new model lines. Don't assume we're just going to see new versions of older watches. Plus, look at the past. Once upon a time, Rolex sold cloisonné enamel dials, calendar watches, moon phase watches, split seconds chronographs, flyback chronographs, chronographs with rotating bezels. There's a rich vein of history that Rolex could mine if it wants to bring back something old and make it new to create an all-new model line based around one of those historic pieces or themes. Rolex also remains absent in truly horlogerie. Arguably, Rolex's only presence in this space are its handcrafted but admittedly polarizing full gem set models. Now, these are done the old-fashioned way, with flames, eye, hand, and tools that would be familiar to a 19th century jeweler. At the same time, not everyone wants a full iced-out Daytona, Yachtmaster, Sky Dweller, or Submariner. So there's plenty of room for Rolex to bring in something like a perpetual calendar, chiming watches, tourbillon regulators. Others like alarms, tidal gauges, and world time remain untapped. And if anything, Rolex over the last 20 years has shown more appetite to experiment. So I wouldn't rule this out. I don't think Rolex would do it just to do it. The world doesn't need another tourbillon. But if you could do something that's truly special, if you could do something that fits Rolex's heritage and incorporate a perpetual calendar or a chiming system, either for an hour striker or for an alarm, or maybe a Yachtmaster that includes a tidal chart like the Coram Admiral's Cup, that would be really, really cool. And I think that there's room for something like that in the catalog. And since ascending in 2014, Rolex CEO Jean-Frédéric Dufour has exhibited an open mind, an outsider's open mind, because remember, he came from Zenith, and a willingness to take unprecedented chances and make changes in the complexion of the Rolex company and Rolex watches. Look at all the changes made under his oversight. We have, for the first time, full titanium watches. We have lefty GMTs for the first time. We have Rolex certified pre-owned just in the last year for the first time. The Rolex Atelier factory restoration program, a lot of people don't even know exists. We have the emoji dials. Did they take a risk? Yeah, but you have to take risks, and Rolex doesn't get enough credit for taking them. Here you go. Also, Rolex, for years, known for its religious devotion to its third-party authorized dealer partners, now owning over 100 Bucherer points of sale, going from basically one factory-owned boutique to the most vertically integrated factory boutique operator in the world through its cash purchase of Bucherer. So do you really want to bet money that present-day Rolex won't make a perpetual calendar or a Grand Faux enamel cloisonné dial? I wouldn't make that bet. Let's see what guys are saying right here. Scott, what is Rolex going to do with CFB? That's a really good question, and I don't know. Technically, Rolex now has 3 brands, Rolex Tudor and Karl F. Bucherer. They got it when they bought the Bucherer chain. They got all of the watchmaking, all of the contracts to distribute Omega, Patek Philippe. It's going to be a while before we know how all this shakes out, whether those other brands are still going to be sold and whether Rolex decides to keep making Karl F. Bucherer watches. One thing's certain, they're definitely going to keep the Karl F. Bucherer manufacturer, which can always augment the watchmaking chops at Rolex and frankly gives them an outfit that's familiar with complicated watchmaking on a small scale. You might see the perpetual calendar, the tourbillon, the striker come out of the CFB shops if it's eventually going to have a Rolex label on the dial. It might not come from Geneva. Think about that for a while. Okay, now, jumping back in, model line extensions. Rolex has a history of this. The Yachtmaster gained a Yachtmaster 2 that was very different, and 42mm variants, and titanium models, and Oyster Flex straps. This is how Rolex has expanded a model line across many different sizes for men and for women. The Yachtmaster is expansive and extensive, and that is an example of how you can take Yachtmaster and make it a whole family of watches. The Explorer incorporated different case sizes, different metals, as well as the dual-time Explorer 2. And the Sea Dweller now theoretically incorporates the Sea Dweller 43, the Deep Sea Sea Dweller, the James Cameron, and the Mammoth Deep Sea Challenge. So the Sea Dweller is expanding as well. We have several different sizes of Datejust and Datate. The Daytona, think about this, could become a model family rather than a single line. Imagine Land Rover splitting off its models like Range Rover and Discovery and Defender into different standalone brands with their own showrooms. Well, guess what? They did that. Or Ford turning the Mustang into a family of cars and crossovers, where you can get EVs, rally-inspired EVs, value-priced commuter coupes for people who don't want to spend a lot of money to get a cool car, and $300,000 supercar track weapons. All of that fits under Mustang. So, Possibilities here include a Daytona collection that has something like the split seconds vintage reference 4113, a 44mm giant of which I think 12 pieces still exist, launched in the 30s and made through the 40s. Impressively, a lot of manufacturer Rolex watchmaking in that, but Rolex hasn't made anything like that since. This could be primed for a comeback. Or vintage inspired. What if Rolex brought back a smaller cased, pump pusher, non-screw down, manual wind Daytona and called it the Cosmograph, a tribute to the Daytonas of the 60s and the 70s. That would be really cool. I would love it, and it could fit alongside a revival of the Jean-Claude Kelly, the Dato Compacts, which was a Rolex principally made during the 50s and early 60s that included a chronograph as well as a triple calendar. I can see this existing with the Saros annual calendar system from the Skydweller. That would be really neat. Alternatively, depending on how far up market they want to take it, that would also be a great platform for a Rolex perpetual calendar. Finally, never count out the potential of entirely new technology. That is an atomic clock. And Rolex, you'll be happy to know, has registered international patents for self-contained wristwatch atomic clocks. This is very different from a radio watch that receives a signal from an atomic clock. Rolex talking about putting the whole thing in the timepiece. They have internationally filed patents on this, and that usually indicates an idea that has progressed beyond the discussion stage and warrants widespread protection as valuable intellectual property in different markets where such a thing might be sold. I can't see Rolex reviving the oyster quartz or any old-style quartz technology timepiece, but a landmark technology like this, self-contained atomic clock with accuracy of seconds over centuries, would be worthy of Rolex's history as an innovator. And that's worth emphasizing because Rolex in the modern era is often described as the king of refinement. If Rolex launches a strap, it's going to be the most exhaustively over-engineered rubber strap of all time. And sure enough, we got the Oyster Flex strap bracelet. Simple ideas are taken to extremes of development. But Rolex, as a watch industry revolutionary, isn't a concept we've seen much of in the last 60 years. There was a time popularizing and perfecting automatic winding, water-resistant cases, instantaneous jumping dates. Rolex had a lot of history in pilots' watches, engineers' watches, motorsports chronographs, dive watches, of which the Sub, in development from the early 50s, was really the first ever. Rolex could reclaim that crown, and after all, with Jean-Frédéric Dufour interested in cementing his legacy at Rolex as one of the great directors general, I can imagine him taking a moonshot and launching something unprecedented. Maybe the time is coming. Guys, viewer wrist shots number 4. Daniel M. of Connecticut captures the spirit of the moment with his Nomos Club campus. Alan S. and his Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter black ceramic contemplate the surf in Georgia, United States. Warren overlooks Melbourne Beach, Florida with his Breitling Super Ocean Heritage 57. Stephen E. of Detroit impresses with his caseback shot of his Glasuta Original CQ panorama date. Spencer C. takes us home with his Watchbox bought Rolex at the venue of his concert performance. Thank you for trusting Watchbox and Max Campanelli. He will be very happy to hear your shout out. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels, your wrist on my list, and thank you to Sean, as ever, limber on the switcher. Time out, Tim out. Thanks for logging on.